Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in this multidimensional existence we call creation. I'm Rockin' Larry Lockin with Pleiadian Express Productions. Tonight we're going to eventually get into the subject of the new Earth, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that society is going to work initially, in the opening decades of it, the first few years. And I'm going to kind of give you an idea of how I think it's going to work and the kind of life we're going to have in it. I can only go about 20 years in because technology is just going to go crazy, but we'll explain that later. First, a couple other things I want to get into, and bear with me, I'm actually really nervous. In the 13 years I've been doing this off and on, this is the most important broadcast that I have ever done, so it's very important that you bear with me. I'm really nervous, okay? First off, I want to read something to you from a gentleman, God rest his soul, who passed away in 2000, and his name was Terence McKenna. If you don't know who Terence is, you'd probably be a little bit better off just to know who he was. Okay? To completely understand him, though, I will warn you, not only do you have to be very into the higher star dimensions, but if you're only into the higher star dimensions, you're probably going to have had to have, and I'll just be honest with you, used a psychedelic a couple times. And now, if you're in the angelic realms solidly, you can still understand it without ever having taken any psychedelics like LSD or DMT or mushrooms or whatever, ayahuasca, okay? Now, even for me, when I first heard this years ago, what I'm about to play you, my multidimensional, mind-blown awake, psychedelicized mind was even a little bit tripped out. We're talking about the split right into the new Earth. Well, Terence thinks it might have happened one other time before. Okay, around the time of, he has it pinned down, and I'm going to read to you what he has to say, and you're going to have to be real patient. It's a good listen, but it's going to take a few minutes to get through it. Another 10, it's going to be about another 15 minutes, people, before we get into what's going to happen in the new Earth. I'm just letting you know now. I know it's a lot easier to read a really intelligent meme like, I think, therefore I am. I know. You can get several hundred likes by posting this, but, people just don't. They're not patient, and that's cool. That's cool, but some people still like to learn and know. So no judgment, but I'm going to read to you what he has to say. Listen, he thinks that this split happened one other time before, between the time of either the Immaculate Conception or the resurrection, okay? Now, I want to just say on a side note, there is a brilliant star sister who I love to help post her stuff. She's one of those few 13-dimensional solid souls. She's brilliant. There was one thing she disagreed with me on, and she set me straight, but I really didn't listen to her. But I trust her intuition flawlessly. But it might be the one thing I need to have her re-explain to me. It's like the only thing I've ever kind of maybe disagreed with her on. Because I always thought that the Immaculate Conception was explained by high-tech artificial insemination from the extraterrestrials, to put Jesus here. But look, I usually don't blindly agree with other people, but a 13th dimensional soul like her, yeah, I'm going to agree with it. But let's get into this, okay? And this is going to be a really hard listen if you're just awakening the star dimensions and haven't ever had your soul psychedelicized. For you ladies that are solidly in the angelic realms of 11th, 12th, and 13D, you'll probably understand the gist of it. Okay. So I'm going to be reading this, okay? I'm going to be skipping over some parts, but you're going to have to follow this, okay? And I appreciate your patience. This is the biggest broadcast out of the probably thousands I've been involved in on various networks. Okay, so it goes a little something like this. Here's him talking. My usual fashion had a new idea which was so weird, immediately shifted and aha. This is not the truth. transmission about the nature of reality. This is the plot for a science fiction novel that I should write and try to hold as the defense that was my shield against the onslaught of this thing. And I've never been one, this is him talking, for Atlantis or Lemuria, well I am, or all these invisible prehistoric lands. Disagree with Terence there, but that people enjoy so much. But I was told a very funny thing. Here's where it starts. I will share with you. It's funny. It's a funny idea. Now let's see, how does it go? It has two versions, one of which speaks a scientific language. The other speaks a mythological language. Okay, so the scientific language goes like this. There's something in the universe called a fractal soliton of an improbability. This means it's a unique active, and it only happens once in a lifetime of a universe. You can think of it as a wavelength with one wave. That is why it is called the soliton. And if one of these things move not in ordinary three-dimensional space, but in some kind of much higher spatial manifold, and when they collide with a planet, or when one collides with a planet in a universe, the time stream of the planet is divided, and two copies of the entire planet spring into existence without either having any knowledge of it's just something which happens. So this voice was telling me that this had happened to the earth, and that was the secret that we were all striving to understand, was that an event in the past had actually divided our time stream, and that a twin of this planet had come into being in another dimension. Okay, so that's the scientific explanation of it. So the mythological explanation was that the universe is Gnostic, that the universe is the creation of a demiurge, not the highest expression of divinity, but kind of a demon, a fallen angel, you might say. And this demiurge was able to coax itself into being and actually incarnate into history as a human being. And that, when this happened, this was then the mythological expression of a fractal soliton of an improbability. And when it happened, the time stream split. The universe is the creation of damage, and the damage impelled itself in the form of an individual, right? And this sort of editor lanting, when you're a demo, he's trying to get funny here, okay? So the time splitting event had to do with the career of Christ, who was an extraordinary manifestation of energy in the historical time stream, not to be confused with a Buddha or a Muhammad or a Zoroaster, who are great saints. And it was something else. It was in some sense what it claimed to be. But in some sense, what it claimed to be in some cases, okay, so now at the moment of, and you choose either the Immaculate Conception or the resurrection, depending on which side of the bed you get up on. He's trying to be funny again. At the moment the time stream split, this other place came into being without having any awareness that, and they were an identical at the moment. They had no idea there was two identical worlds. Now Christ had no children, so what I forgot to say was that the event, the fractal soliton of an improbability, there's the LSD again, has the quantum mechanical half charge. So that one of the universe, it happens in the other universe. It doesn't happen. And so everything about these two worlds was the same, except that in one of them, the Immaculate Conception had not taken place, or resurrection had not taken place. Now, because Christ had no children in the world which he was absent, it was not a genetic line which was missing. It was an ideological line which never received expression. And consequently, as time passed, first decades and then centuries, the absence of this particular intellectual influence in the world changed the world radically in the following way. Greek science did not suffer the suppression that occurred with the conversion of Constantine. The academies were not closed. The Hermetic knowledge was not repressed. Conversely, the empire was stronger and was able to repel the barbarian invasions of the 2nd to the 5th century and mathematics, which had halted in our world. That Diophantus proceeded through his disciple Hypatia to develop a calculus by AD 370, so that the millennium of Christian stasis that occurred in our world did not occur in that world, in the other earth. As time passed and engineering advances occurred by around 850 AD, they had ships that were able to cross the Atlantic Ocean. They encountered the Mayan civilization reaching its fullest flower on Guatemala and the Yucatan Peninsula. And in fact, the vision I saw, the Roman, for Cosimadorus V, make a pilgrimage to Tikal in 922, be present at the coronation of a king at the end of Bahati Main. Anyway, this Greco-Roman imperial culture immediately reorganized the genius of the Mayans in mathematics, astronomy, and Europe was transformed into an amalgamation, a Greco-Mayan civilization with it stopped for a second, which let me see, the Mayan civilization, and the Mayan civilization continued to develop. Now, one of the influences the Mayans brought into Europe around 950 was their extremely sophisticated psychopharmacopoeia and shamanism. And this mated with Neoplatonism and Hermeticism, so that rather than science developing as it did develop in our world, a kind of magical psychopharmacological technology of thought and understanding was what was developed over the centuries. And then in later centuries before it happened in our world, they contacted the Orient, and the sun, the dynastic influence of the sun poured itself into the creation of the global civilization, such that by around 1200 AD, they were able to land on the moon, and create cybernetic global civilization similar to the kind we have now. They continued evolving with all this psychotronic and shamanic led arrived, and now by this time you can imagine it was an unbelievable, exotic, and alien civilization. Yeah, you should see the graphics to this. Civilization compared to our own world, the fruits of their psychedelic and psychoanalysis investigation into higher space was the discovery of our world. They discovered us. What happened? They figured it out by studying dreams and by making deep journeys into psychedelic space. They were able to discover our sleeping unconscious with the repository of the legacy of the Christian century, when it was under the reigns of a demiurge ideology type dude. And they convinced of this notion of saving us. They were determined to save us. It has to do with this whole thing about the UFOs and influence and dreams and astral traveling. And the other side is actually the manifestation of this bizarre Greco-Mayan post-mortem star-faring civilization trying to reach across the dimensions to save us from the momentum of our history by making aware of first of all their existence and also their technology, which is evolving toward a point where I think around the Mayan millennium, around 2012, the time island will flow past the time island. He was really thinking 2030, but I'll get into that. Streams will be rejoined, and we will make peace with this civilization. 2030, not 2012, not 2012, Terence. Then with this totally different culture and this completely different take on reality. So this came to me in the space of about 15 seconds. and more details have flowed in. And I use it mostly as a meditational device because it's so interesting to ask, to be told about how this other civilization developed. It's amazing exoticism, and you know it's Neoplatonism, it's Taoism, it's Mayan influences, it's LSD influence. No, he didn't say that. Kind of civilization that we inherited. I've always thought, that Christianity, without making any judgment about Christ himself, that Christianity is hands down the single most reactionary force in all of human history. Yeah, probably. And where would we be had the 1200 years not been given over to this peculiar meditation? All the pieces were in place for the kind of civilization that I've outlined. It was just a coincidence, I guess. And he's got a part 2 to that too, but it's really deep stuff. And like I said, I'm not making any judgment, but unless you're completely in the angel dimensions, you probably have had to take in a little bit of psychedelics to understand that. It's deep. Look, he tied it into when he started talking about 2012 there towards the end, okay? And, and how I chimed in with no, he really meant 2013 or 2030. Okay. So I had this thought around late 2010, it came to me, and then I heard it somewhere else. It came to me that we were in an 18-year, we were in a 36-year galactical shift, okay, that started in 1994, oddly enough, the year I graduated from high school. Okay, so what 2012 was, the big deal about